BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. In this episode, the future plans for farmers in Scotland and Wales, and the UK closes its border to imports of German meat as the authorities there tackle an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. Farmers here are told to be vigilant.
We've not had foot-mouth disease in Europe since 2011. It's not yet known how it got there and where it's got to, and our risk is heightened. So I'm absolutely concerned, yes.
We'll have more from the chief vet later on. First, this week we're taking a look at machinery, a vital but very expensive commodity on the farm. And particularly in the arable sector, some of the most expensive kit is only used seasonally for just a few weeks in the year. To keep costs down, many farmers are now part of the national network of machinery rings, where those with kit can loan it out to other farms that need it. Nancy Nicholson has been to the Scottish borders where the movement originated.
I'm on Merton Estate on the outskirts of St Boswell's in the Borders, just on the banks of the River Tweed. And it's an arable estate, so not much action taking place in the fields in January. But I'm here with the farm's manager, Jack Parsons, and the machinery ring manager, Michael Bain. Just describe at the moment, Jack, what's going on round about us, because it is busy in here.
Yep, so we're in the grading shed. We grow sort of 130, 140 hectares of seed potatoes, and we are grading through them, sizing them into different size bands.
It's a huge potato store, but what other kit do you need on this farm?
So we're farming about 4,000 acres in total, growing combinable crops as well as seed potatoes and vining peas for another growing group. So we obviously need combine harvesters. We've got 2 of those, potato harvester, and then some big tractors between 2 and 600 horsepower. We're a member of the ring, and even on this scale we still need to bring in specialist machinery, bits of kit that we can't justify having all year round, that we can just bring in as and when required.
Merton is just one of the farms and estates that's part of the machinery ring. And Michael, you've got a lot of growers now. It's mushroomed, hasn't it?
That's right. The Borders Machinery Ring was the first ring in the UK to be set up in 1987. The catalyst for that was the bad harvest of 85, when farmers really had to focus on their fixed cost base. So the core business initially was matching up machinery and labour between our member farms. And as the rings evolved over the years, we've added a lot of services, and we now have just under 1,000 members in the Borders. There's now 8 rings in Scotland with a combined membership of about 7,500.
What are examples of the biggest kit that gets transferred from farm to farm?
On your typical family farms, a lot of the acreages wouldn't justify owning their own combine harvester now, so combines, forage harvesters, that gives the opportunity for some farmers, some contractors to have that kit and spread their costs by supplying it out to the ring members.
How much would it cost me to hire a combine for the day?
You're probably on an acreage price anything between £35 to £45 an acre. But those machines now, the biggest ones are not far off £1 million, so it's a big capital investment.
There must be drawbacks though, surely, to sharing machinery. On a good harvest day, everybody wants the combine.
That's correct. I would say at the moment there's still a lot of capacity of kit out there. So one example would be the wet harvest of 2012. There was a big demand for balers and combines in these narrow weather windows, but we managed to satisfy the demand when it came.
Machinery ring manager Michael Bain with Nancy Nicholson on the Scottish borders. Facing change and finding opportunity in agriculture was the theme at this year's Oxford Farming Conference, where last week more than 600 delegates from farming and agribusiness came together. The DEFRA Secretary Steve Reid addressed the conference while tractors lined the street outside, protesting about the implementation of inheritance tax on agricultural businesses. As farming is a devolved issue, the other 3 ministers responsible for agriculture across the nations were also speaking at the conference. Each of them is designing a new post-Brexit farm payment scheme, replacing the old EU system. They're all moving towards rewarding farmers not for the land they farm, but for providing better habitats for wildlife, flood mitigation, improving soils and carbon sequestration. Yesterday we heard from Northern Ireland's Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Today, Charlotte Smith speaks to Hugh Iranka-Davies, Rural Affairs Cabinet Secretary in Wales, and the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity in Scotland, Jim Fairley, about the budget allocated to them by the Westminster Government.
It's not enough. It's been frozen since 2018. It should have been rising with inflation. It needs to change to go back to being on a land-based rather than a population basis. Scotland is losing out massively, as are the other devolved nations. So that really needs to be fixed as soon as possible.
It's what we asked for as a minimum, so I'm pleased we've got it, because it allows us to do the transition through this preparatory year for the Sustainable Farming Scheme, to guarantee the BPS payments to all Welsh farmers and to move ahead to the introduction of the FSS in 2026. Going forward, I think we need to collectively argue for greater quantum of funding. It's not simply on food production, food security and so on, but it's because we're also asking the farmers to deal with nature and climate emergencies, cleaning up our rivers, dealing with flood alleviation, all of those things as well. The other aspect I think we do need to look at is around whether we can do more in levering in really strong, ethical, with high integrity, green finance into this space.
That, though, is very complicated, isn't it? Because there are lots of schemes which, frankly, don't measure up to their claims.
Oh, entirely. Any schemes need to be on high integrity, strong principles, and that means, for example, that there is actually contribution and engagement with local communities, that it's done with, not to, that it genuinely hits the strategic objectives that we have, that address the nature and climate emergency, and that they are additional to what we're doing in wider government and taxpayer funding.
But I have a real concern about natural capital being lost to the people who live and work on the land to other organisations, big organisations. I have a concern about that. We've seen it before in Scotland where the natural capital has disappeared out of Scotland at an alarming rate, and I want to make sure that that is held here in the country.
I just want to talk briefly about your post-Brexit schemes that you're designing, piloting at the moment. There was a question that one of the people here at the conference pointed out, that's taking an enormously long time. And to the frustration of farmers who want to know how much for doing what as soon as possible. How close are we to actual rules?
Well, we've already passed the Agriculture Reform Act. It's already an act, and now we're putting the regulations in place. But bearing in mind, we've been part of an EU system that has been on the go for decades, and then we need to start again. So the safest thing, and as far as I'm concerned, the best thing that we're doing for the agriculture community is building it gradually so that we get it right, with that co-collaboration with the farming community. And if it is taking time, I'd rather we took more time and got it right rather than doing it quickly and getting the disasters that we've seen elsewhere, as happened down here in England.
I'd agree with Jim on this. It does take longer to do a proper collaborative approach that is meaningful and deep. We've got to a good place in Wales. We said we would take, on the back of a consultation that had over 12,000 responses, we had over 5,000 farmers on the steps of the Senate saying, please will you listen to us? We said we would, we have, we're working directly with them. And on that basis, this preparatory year, we're not wasting the time. We've already released back in December the outline scheme. We've listened, we've changed elements of it as well. We now have 4 or 5 months to finalise the detail of the payments, so they'll know by May or June, and then it'll be ready for introduction then as soon as we step into 2026.
When you became the Rural Affairs Minister, that it was a very different situation. As you say, massive protests across Wales, people very, very angry about the proposals that had been made. We're now in a situation across the country where people are very, very angry with the UK Labour government. What advice would you give to Steve Reid to try and take some of the sting out of the inheritance tax issue to move forward?
Listen, I'm loath to give advice to any other government minister because I make enough missteps. I've been in situations like this myself before. The only thing I could say is that, and he started to do it on the platform today, he talked about that collaborative approach, bringing people together, getting through the difficulties that we currently have, and then working together on solutions. Jim?
OK, collaboration would have meant that he would have spoken to the devolved nations and said, what does inheritance tax look like? I think, and like you here, I'm loath to give any other administration advice, but I will put this message to the UK government. They need to stop that one, rethink it, come back, collaborate with the devolved nations, collaborate with the farming unions and say, what does this actually mean?
Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity in Scotland, Jim Fairley, and Rural Affairs Cabinet Secretary in Wales, Hugh Iranka-Davies. Farmers in the UK are being warned to be vigilant after foot and mouth disease killed several buffalo in Germany. The UK has temporarily banned imports of German meat and dairy, as well as live cattle, sheep and pigs, after the outbreak in the Brandenburg region. Back in 2001, an outbreak of foot and mouth in the UK caused the death of millions of animals through disease and preventative culling. Foot and mouth disease does not affect humans, but it can spread rapidly between animals. Currently, there are no cases confirmed in the UK. I asked the chief vet, Christine Middlemiss, what we know of the situation in Germany.
The disease was found on a small farm of water buffalo. 3 had died. A 3-kilometre and 10-kilometre restriction zone are in place around the infected premises. All susceptible animals in the 1 kilometre around the infected premises have been culled. And the other animals in the 3 and 10-kilometre restriction zones are being sampled. And to date, all of them are negative. Whilst the Germans are doing the investigations to understand just where the virus has come from and where it might have gone to, once that information starts coming through the system and they're able to assure us about areas of the country that are definitely free, then we may look at opening up trade from those specific areas. But at the moment, we take a very precautionary approach.
Is there a chance it could have already spread elsewhere? I mean, how quick were the Germans to contain this?
Well, we know that the animals had died, and also that in testing they actually found antibodies to foot and mouth disease, not just virus. So they must have been infected for a number of days for the antibodies to have been able to develop. And once they detected it, it was confirmed very quickly and they've put the restrictions in place. There is still concern about that period before confirmation and understanding if the virus has spread from that farm.
And so does that mean that we need to check any product which was already in circulation in our food chain here in the UK?
So what we've done, product that was already on its way to us is being held at our border control posts. Product that that had already arrived before confirmation, so it was sent in good faith, we are tracing, and our agencies will be identifying all that product and getting in contact with people about it to see if it has been consumed yet or not.
And just to say, of course, the reason you're checking food and stopping product coming in is not because it's dangerous to people, but if it was thrown away and eaten by an animal, then it would be.
Absolutely. So this is a disease of animals only, but it is so terribly infectious with such small amounts of virus that can, and I mean a sugar cube piece of meat, of infected meat, could have millions of doses in it, that we're taking this very precautionary action to make sure that we're minimising, as far as we can, risk to UK farmers and UK animals.
So what should farmers here in the UK be doing?
Ensure that you're only feeding animal food to animals, so no kitchen waste, scraps, restaurant waste, anything like that. That is illegal. And also make yourself familiar on gov.uk of the signs to look out for foot and mouth disease. And if you're concerned about your animals, contact your private vet or the Animal Plant Health Agency.
Are you concerned?
Oh, absolutely, because it's appeared in Europe. We've not had foot-mouth disease in Europe since 2011. It's not yet known how it got there and where it's got to, and our risk is heightened. So absolutely concerned, yes.
The chief vet, Christine Middlemiss. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Beatrice Fenton. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.